Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next The Reckoning of Roku chapter analysis video. This one's going to be for chapter 10, which is called Knowledge to Destroy. Right as a start here, I'll mention I do have YouTube channel membership enabled on the channel if you would like to help support the channel, especially when it comes to me doing long-running series like this covering the novels. But that's just there if you would like to help support. Otherwise, let's get into this chapter, which is very interesting because this is the introduction of our other point of view character, Malia. It is the introduction, effectively, to the natives on the mysterious island, of course. That's a plot point here. And it's super interesting, the timing of this. Sozin has been here, encountered some earthbenders here, but they're not the natives. He's left. And now Roku and Gyatso are on their way here, and it's at this point we cut to this young girl, Malia, who lives on this island, and we get the introduction to what's going on here from her perspective. Straight away, I think this is probably where it's important to bring in the idea of sort of this is where the Randy Rabai influence on the book kind of, I suppose, really heavily comes in, because he's from the Philippines, and effectively the idea is that this island is meant to sort of be the introduction of a lot of Philippines kind of culture, that sort of thing, into Avatar. That's what you should be kind of looking at in terms of, I suppose, a lot of the names, I suppose, would be in that way. A lot of the kind of specific cultural things that are mentioned here also in relation to that. So that's what you should be kind of thinking about. Maybe look up some stuff about that, but we will get into it here. So pretty much everything that we're going to talk about here is relatively new because it's a new place and it is a whole, you know, group of people here living on this island, and of course we basically know already isolated from the rest of the world. And the real question going in is how much of what we were told in the legend that Sozin read is actually true. But anyway, let's jump in here. So we have here this girl Malia. Now it takes a while to get this reveal, but it gets confirmed later on. She's 16 years old, and she is a non-bender. So there are benders on the island, and we'll get that detail immediately here, but more as we go through. And basically, she has arrived at the clan's kind of blacksmith, effectively here, because she needs to get a new knife forged, effectively. So we see that the main kind of town blacksmith here, his name is Baku, and he's using firebending to heat up a strip of metal. Now, it's interesting the way to describe it here. He literally heats it, and it turns from kind of orange to yellow as he's heating it between his hands. And he kind of hands it over to her to do it herself, because she likes to learn all of these techniques. That's one of the big things we find out about Malia in this chapter, is that she is a scout. That is her role within the kind of the clan, basically. And she has chosen to basically try and learn a little bit of everything from everyone on the island. So she knows all of these survival skills. She specifically chooses to be quite heavily involved with the forging of her own weapons, rather than just being like, hey, Baku, I need a new knife, make me a knife. No, she's getting involved here. So he hands her the metal. She hammers away at it to sort of shape it. You know, she gives it back to him to do the kind of heating stuff with firebending. And it ends up kind of working out well. It's a teardrop-shaped blade that she ends up forging, and he's very happy with this. He says, you know, this is much better than the last one. And she thanks him for helping her with this, saying, thank you to Tang Baku. So that's just an interesting kind of dynamic here. And it is just noted here, what Baku says is that, like, I wish the others in the clan would, you know, care enough to learn to craft this stuff themselves. Everyone else just orders me around. Even, and he doesn't say the name, but Malia in her head is thinking like, oh yeah, no one was foolish enough to kind of say the name of the chief out aloud, because the island, as we kind of find out even here, is completely covered in fog. Like, it even covers the actual like island where they are. You can't see that far in front of yourself, and this is the main reason for why you can go to this island and kind of be on it. So you get through the fog to get onto the island, but you still don't necessarily, it doesn't guarantee you actually find the people. So the mention of Asho from the legends as kind of walking through the fog and eventually stumbling upon the clan is very much the idea of like, that's what you have to do. You almost have to get lucky to actually come across the natives here. So that's what's going on here. So yeah, spoken like a true scout is the idea of like, she wants to learn how to do things for herself. Now, she tells us here in the narration that this is actually more out of necessity than just her wanting to do this, because it says here, with parents like hers, she'd always had to learn anything she could to help fend for herself. I don't believe we ever go super in depth on her relationship with her parents, but there just seems to be a real sense of they've always been, for whatever reason, very like hands off, or she just doesn't have a good relationship with them and kind of stays to herself, that she is a scout and so she's doing a lot of this stuff on her own. And even when she more comes back to the kind of where they all live on the island, she mostly just comes back to do the stuff that she needs to do and leaves, and doesn't really go to visit her parents and stuff like that. That's what we get. We get a brief rundown of the various skills she has learned from people. From the best gatherers, she learned which plants were edible and poisonous and curative. From the best hunters, she learned to make weapons and traps, to track and capture and kill, to gut, to skin and roast. From the fishermen, she learned to pull life from the river and the streams. From the farmers, she learned this. From the weavers, she learned this. And from the benders, she learned about the qualities and limitations of each element. So there's one where you're thinking to yourself, oh, is that the confirmation that there are benders of all 4 elements on the island? Each element? I guess so, but that's very interesting. And this is where we get the introduction of the clan's chief, Ulo. So this is a ULO is the name of the chief. It says here, when he returned from the sacred cave after the autumnal equinox, he was apparently told a few years ago by young Gib that this is why Malia was given that she has to serve as the clan scout. So this is where that kind of came from. She's a scout because Ulo apparently spoke with the spirit that lives in this cave, young Gib, and this is where it comes from. So this is sort of the setup of the tribe, as you sort of see here, is that, okay, there's a clan sort of like elder, their chief, Ulo, and then he's the main one who has contact with this kind of cave spirit, Yungip, and together it seems like they make decisions about what the rest of the clan does, including what their roles are. So Malia is a scout, and yeah, she has to learn all this stuff to survive in the wild, because one of the big things that she does as a scout is, of course, scout the perimeter of the island to see if any outsiders show up. And it's a highly respected role within the clan. And it's just noted here that this more isolated role suits Malia well. That she likes people, but she also is fine kind of being on her own, is sort of the idea that we get from her. The handful of days she spent in the village every few weeks to repair her weapons and tools, restock her provisions, and report back to Ulo were more social interaction than she required, basically. So that's interesting. And yeah, so she finishes up with her blade. Baku kind of dips it in water, of course, to kind of cool it off. And he's basically just like, you know, I'll finish doing this last few steps. You just come back and pick it up. You'll want to do the handle wrap yourself, I'm guessing. And she's like, yes. He then is just like, hey, on your way there, why don't you go out and find Kamau? And he winks at her. And we get the details here of like, this is sort of Baku tried to sort of set Malia up with his son, Kamau. But we get the reveal of like, she likes the blacksmith well enough, Baku, but his son was an utter fool. So she has no interest whatsoever in this. And then we also get the details somewhere in this that her parents, part of the reason she doesn't really want to particularly go over and speak to her parents is that the only real thing her parents talk to her about is when she planned to marry. So she just wants to avoid that entirely. So she moves on to her next task, and it's just a few details here as she goes through the place. She slipped through the mist and saw only those she needed to see. Most of the waterbenders were in the sacred cave, but she found the healer who helped restore the sprained ankle Malia had been walking on for days. So straight away there we have a confirmation. Firebenders, yes. Waterbenders, yes, including waterbending healing. So that's very unique. That's very interesting. Even I think you would say the firebending kind of like forging and the heat control, I think you would have to do that like that without like damaging yourself. That feels like a kind of more specialized kind of almost form of firebending there, where like heat's always been part of firebending, but like the close control to just touch metal as you're heating it to the point where it's like molten is kind of crazy to think about. Then we get this detail. Then she found one of the earthbenders to advise her on locating more of the black red ore their clan used to forge steel. One of the cooks showed her how to make mudfish stew. And so even just returning to the clan for a few days here, she's learning even more stuff from these people. One of the weavers helped her to better modify her Tolge skirt so it wouldn't restrict her movement. So there you get the idea. What Malia is wearing is a Tolge skirt, which was the same thing Avatar Zalir was described as wearing. So they don't inherently make the full connection, but like there's an interesting idea there, of course, obviously. So you're kind of wondering, does that mean like the previous Avatar came from this island, or what are we talking about, is sort of the idea. So yeah, there's everything so far except airbending, but we will get airbenders, so that's an interesting detail here. So the earthbenders can help find ore, which is kind of interesting. Like I guess sort of seismic sense thing, it doesn't necessarily mean like they know metal bending as such, but obviously I guess if you exclude metal bending, the idea is I guess they can sense through the ground and then hit something that they can't quite sense, and so they know there's probably metal there. Part of just living on this island that long, it's a skill that they know. And then cool, unique ore, black red ore, and you're like, okay, well Sozin's not here for that, but then you're wondering, wait, why is the Earth Kingdom here? This resource is probably something significant as well. So that's something to remember here as well. Then we get introduced to the village's best hunter, a woman named Mama Maril. So that's Mamaloril. I did listen to the audiobook, so I'm trying to do the pronunciations as best as I can on these names, but I think that's what it is. So yeah, improving her bow and spear techniques from Mama Maril. One of the gatherers demonstrated how to extract poison from a rare basilisk centipede. So there's an interesting animal. And also how to extract crimson ink from sea snails. Okay, this is where the mention of her parents nagging her about marriage kind of comes up. And then she walks past, she's going to speak to Ulo. She walks past Ulo's daughters, who inform him that like he's teaching. And so as she heads up to him, he's basically telling a story, one of the legend stories of the clan to the little ones, basically. And it's noted here, she had heard this story before, the tale of the Babayan clan. That's Baybayin, and it's described here. They were a peaceful, mixed community like their own. They had existed on the other side of their island centuries ago. One day, a group of soldiers in blood-red armor sailed to their shores. The soldiers declared the island territory of their clan and demanded that every family without any firebenders leave immediately, never to return. When the Babayan clan resisted, the soldiers burned the community to ash. Malia had always wondered how much of the story, any of Ulo's stories, in fact, were true. And what we go through here is this idea of she remembers being younger and remember hearing these stories, and the details would always change. A name, a place, a sequence of events. And when she would ask about these inconsistencies, one time Ulo cracked her across the knuckles with a bamboo rod. When she asked her parents about it, an inconsistency, she was forced to kneel on the on raw grains of rice for hours. So she's punished for questioning inconsistencies in these stories that are obviously meant to make the clan afraid of outsiders, warning against the violence that outsiders will come and take over our island. But there's lies apparently about them. So what are we doing with this here? What's going on here? That's interesting. So she learned at a young age that to question the stories was to question Ulo. To question Ulo was to question Yungip, and to question Yungip was to invite their people's destruction. So a little bit of kind of controlling behavior here from the clan here. So that's interesting. And Ulo, we see, you catch up with him talking here. The Babayan clan is why we must always make the proper sacrifices and offerings to Yungip each equinox. If not for Yungip, our ancestors might also have perished long ago. So I'll mention the equinox here because, again, it was mentioned before that it was after one of these events that this is where Malia got her role in the clan from. So obviously the equinox is effectively the other equivalent event to a solstice. So you have the two solstices, but then you also have like the two equinoxes as being these kind of like similar kind of quote unquote celestial events. I don't think they've ever been mentioned in Avatar before, but this book, of course, deals with them as being kind of important to this island, which I think makes sense because the equinox obviously is where sort of the equator of the world comes into play quite heavily, and I'm guessing this island sits exactly in the middle on the equator, so the equinox I'm guessing would play naturally a important role to this place, and we'll see as we go forward that it clearly plays a spiritual role somewhat similar to the solstices. So just get that into your head, the idea that we have foundation in Avatar already of important spiritual stuff happening with solstices, but also now equinoxes. So yes, that's just that little detail. Then we just get the detail here. It's kind of interesting. Malia's two little brothers ran past without so much as a glance, and that was fine by her. Both were born after she had become a scout, and she had only ever had a passing presence in their lives. So again, it's just this idea of whatever reason, like she just doesn't have a strong connection to her family because of the role she has in the clan, but then I guess just because of the relationship that there actually is, for whatever reason, the families maybe are not as kind of interlinked as you'd maybe want them to be, or is it specific to Malia? It's not particularly clear. So anyway, she finally gets to talk to Ulo on his own when the kids kind of head off. He offers her tea. It's noted here, it's like, what's this? Moon blooming Sampoguita. And that this is something that it only bloomed at night during a full moon. And you could use this blended into a fine powder. And this could be fed to a trapped animal to dull its senses for a kinder kill. But anyway, the report here, he's like, okay, you're a scout, you're here, that must be because something has happened. I assume the news is not good. No. And so we get the idea of Malia saw the earthbender. She is aware that there are earthbenders on the island, and a lot of those details, you know, that we've seen already in the book, they're getting caught up to speed on, basically. So, the small group of earthbenders that Malia had stumbled upon nearly 2 moons ago were the first that she had encountered since she's been a scout. So it's been obviously, I guess, a few years on the island since they've had outsiders. These earthbenders are the first in that time. She had found their camp at Itak Cove in the northeast. She dismounted Kilat, her gorilla tarsier, and approached by foot from the tree. So she has her own kind of like pet kind of animal kind of going on here. You get the name Kilat, and it's a gorilla tarsier. So obviously we all know what a gorilla is. A tarsier, looking it up, is a pretty small little primate kind of monkey type thing. You've probably seen it before. It's a pretty small monkey with kind of pretty big eyes. So I'd love to know what the actual visual is of this, because I guess it's meant to be this really interesting blend of one of the larger kind of primate monkey kind of type animals with one of the smaller ones, but like it's a animal that you can actually ride on, and it's quite agile through like a kind of foresty kind of environment like this, which is quite interesting. They will note throughout the book here that this animal is unique to this island. You will not find this animal anywhere else in the entire Avatar world, which is interesting. So we get the details here of her stumbling across them. It says she had counted 6. They wore the symbols and green shades of the Earth Kingdom, which Malia recognized from Ulo's stories. The youngest was around her age, the oldest around Baku's. All were earthbenders. 4 were built like soldiers and wore helmets and shell-plated armor. The remaining 2 wore simple clothing and spent most of their time gazing at the plants and terrain. By eavesdropping, she learned that there had also been 2 more in their party, but they'd vanished without a trace one night. So, those missing 2 are the 2 that Sozin, Dalase, and Kozuru killed in their kind of opening chapter arriving on the island. So they're now out of the way, but we also learned that, okay, there's a group of earthbenders here. It's actually a very relatively small group, but that there are also 2 kind of non-military personnel with them, so but they are earthbenders. So what's going on there? And we will get into this here as we go through it. So we just get Malia kind of like spying on them, basically watching what they are actually doing. She reported the initial like sense of finding them for the first time, and was told basically keep a close eye on them as a scout. And so she had, yes, she just notes here the idea of like the 4 earthbenders pretty much did typical stuff. Guarding, sparring, attempting to fish. You know, they're not super skilled at the survival skills, but they do what they need to do to survive. They rarely cleaned anything. Interesting, in a comparison here of styles, their earthbending was blunt and forceful, often used in service of idle competitions. They were a far cry from the rapacious beasts Ulo had always painted them as in the story of Outsiders. It was the other 2, though, a mother and a daughter, it turned out, who had captured Malia's interest. They examined everything, every plant, rock, animal, insect they came across, and used delicate earthbending to lift burrowing crabs from the sand, trap beetles, split stones. They sketched drawings and took notes. And there's a bit of a comparison they're trying to make here, because like Malia as a character is doing this in a way amongst her own clan. She's learning from everyone that she meets. And so here she's actually encountering outsiders who are interested in everything they encounter here. And in a way, she's interested in finding out about how unique everything on this island is compared to the rest of the world. And so she kind of feels like the stories surely aren't referring to people like this, because they're just here honestly interested in stuff for kind of almost knowledge's sake, basically. What's the problem, effectively? And she just, as she spies on them, kind of thinks about the idea of like, they're amazed at everything, you know. The first time they picked up a dragon paw fruit, she wants to tell them the best way to eat it, basically. The first day they spotted a gorilla tarsier, you know, she is amazed at their reaction to a new animal, that sort of idea. But Ulo basically tells her that you do not understand the outsiders as I do. They only seek knowledge to destroy. So there's the title of the chapter drop right here. This is his very strong views about outsiders. They only want to learn stuff about our island so that they can destroy it or use it in some way. Malia finds his tone condescending, but doesn't show that to the chief, of course. It says here, as chief, he was the only clan member allowed to leave the island. A privilege he lorded over everyone in 1,000 small ways. So there you go. More frustrations, I suppose, a little bit there. But maybe he didn't know everything. Perhaps some wielded knowledge as a weapon, but maybe there were others, like this mother and daughter, whose curiosity was pure. Maybe they wanted to know more about the world because they loved the world. And he just says, watch them carefully for the sake of young Yip. And so the reveal here is that she reveals that they've moved their camp not like further to the coast, but actually further inland. So of course they view this as that's a bit of a problem. That means they're staying even longer. And so we get to the point now where it's effectively about like, okay, Can you confirm to me? They've not sent messenger hawks or really messaged off the island. Nope, I don't think they have. Good. So basically, can you get them to turn around before the equinox comes? So there's a setup of the next equinox. The autumnal equinox is coming up. This will be another time where Ulo is going to speak with Youngip, and they don't want that to be interrupted, basically. So we need to get the outsiders off the island before this happens. And he's basically asking her, you know what you need to do, basically. And she's like, yes, I'll get them to turn around. I think I can do that. But Ulo's like, you think? You don't sound so sure. Perhaps Amihan would be better suited to the task. And so we're then introduced to the idea of this. This is the other scout, the veteran scout, middle-aged woman, airbender with blue eyes, and a twisted sense of humor. And we do get introduced to her, Malia, taking over as scout from Amihan one day, and noted splattered corpses of toads on the road, and she'd been practicing her airbending, wanting to see how high she could launch these toads into the air. And so gives you a little bit of sense of the kind of cruelty of this character, and one of the big reveals that's going to happen over the course of the book when it comes to sort of some of the truths about things that Malia doesn't know about her own clan. And Ulo's like, Malia says, it won't be necessary to involve Amihan. Ulo's like, we'll see. You're not growing too attached to these outsiders, are you? And she's like, no, I'm not. And he says, good, they're not like us. When they find something they deem valuable, they do not protect it. They steal and exploit and hoard it. They strip forests, poison waterways, and gut mountains. They do not stop until they've gathered as much of the thing as they can, leaving behind only destruction. In my time as chief, more and more outsiders have been reaching our shores. It is more important than ever that we are ready to give our lives to protect Youngip. Are you ready? Are you prepared to do that, Malia? She says, I am. And he just says, I hope so. And he dismisses her. So the idea here is we're setting up the idea of Malia feels, okay, I've got to do something to get the people off the island before the big event sort of comes up. And I don't really want the other scout to get involved. But the question obviously is, you should be probably asking here is, what is it that Ulo wants her to do versus what is it Malia thinks she has to do, and is there a difference between those two things? And there's clearly a difference in how they view it in terms of has she gotten a little bit attached to the outsiders? Maybe the mother and the daughter, perhaps. And obviously Ulo really doesn't like outsiders. And obviously for a isolated kind of community like this, it's a situation where you get it. That would be the way that it is viewed, where because they have all this unique stuff, Fire Nation Earth Kingdom coming in, they would try and take a lot of this stuff. But is the description of outsiders by Ulo, all the stories told to just paint people as marauders, basically, is that a bit over the top? Is that the right thing to do to make everyone kind of cautious or not? Especially when you have a character like Malia who can kind of is beginning to see through these kind of mistakes in logic. There's inconsistencies in what she's being told, and she wants to learn about all this other stuff. She's learning from everyone on the island, and in a way kind of is maybe interested in learning about the outside world. And Ulo, of course, is the only one who's allowed to go to the outside world. So you create this situation where, okay, Ulo is a character who you definitely have some questions about overall. But it is just the opening chapter from Malia's perspective. We will have more with this. There's more reveals to come out on this side of things. But as an intro, I think that's fascinating. We get direct confirmation there are benders of all four elements on the island, which is straight away a bit of a thing where you're like, how did this come about? A mixed community in the Roku era that's been around for, I think, centuries at the very least gets brought up here. But because the clothing seems to maybe line up potentially with going back as far as the like formation of the Fire Nation itself, like pre-Fire Nation, it's almost like, are we going back thousands of years? Like, how many centuries are we going back here? There is a real sense of like, this is a place that really has protected itself for a long time, and hasn't been influenced by sort of modern politics and all this stuff. So everyone's suddenly descending on the island here for the plot to take place is an interesting concept, of course. It also gives us, a sense for like, okay, the earthbender presence on the island isn't huge, but they're investigating it for some reason. Like there's people here who are clearly, I guess, scientists trying to figure out what's going on here. And it's like, okay, is it just a scientific expedition for knowledge's sake, or are they looking for something? Because again, we were introduced to the idea of this special kind of red and black ore that's important to the island. There's a bunch of different things going on. But the other point here is, I forgot to mention this. When Ulo gives Malia the tea, he uses waterbending. So Ulo is a waterbender. We do get that confirmed in the chapter here. But you would not say anything that we see the benders do right now is enhanced bending. Okay, firebender heating up some metal between his hands, but it's a sort of specialized skill just because he's a blacksmith, I guess, but doesn't seem crazy. Ulo does some, pouring tea basically with water bending. The airbender is described as launching toads into the air. And the earthbenders have some sort of a, like, ore sensing ability. And it's like, okay, nothing crazy yet. But then we also there's one interesting detail of, like, the waterbenders can heal. So they have healing here, that's good. And most of them spend their time in the sacred cave, which is apparently the cave where Yungip, the spirit that this clan worships, is from, and they meet him during the equinox, which is by itself an interesting kind of lore reveal of like, okay, solstices and equinoxes, cool. I really like this as just like a, wow, this is actually really cool. Like the island that we got to see, the mysterious island that we got to see in like the last book, Legacy of Yang Chen, there wasn't too much to it. It was more of a plot-based thing in terms of what facility is built on this ultimately like uninhabited island. Here it's like, no, borderline like ancient civilization here. That's super interesting. And then the fact that obviously from the author we know it's based on the kind of Philippines, which is a cool little detail in terms of like some of the naming stuff and some of the details specifically of their customs that they have. So definitely cool stuff, and it creates this situation in the book now where we have Roku point of view chapters, Sozin point of view chapters, and now Malia point of view chapters. And we're interested in all of them because we have Gyatso and Roku's relationship, and we want to see where that goes. How does Roku do on his first mission as the Avatar? What's the deal with Gyatso's airbending? With Sozin, we're like, he's going to Wan Shitong's library. Well, how's that going to go? That's a crazy thing I want to see. And then the interesting, fascinating island with a very unique culture, but what seems to be a very controlling chief who potentially lies to his people to keep control. Fascinating. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on Chapter 10 of The Reckoning of Roku. Otherwise, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.